This is Laura Vanderkam. I'm a mother of 5, an author, journalist, and speaker.
And this is Sarah Hart-Unger. I'm a mother of 3, a practicing physician, and blogger on the side. We are 2 working parents who love our careers and our families.
Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. Here we talk about how real women manage work, family, and time for fun. From figuring out childcare to mapping out long-term career goals, we want you to get the most out of life. Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. This is Laura. This is episode 274, which is airing at the very beginning of November 2022. I'm going to be interviewing Laura Overdeck, who is the founder of the Bedtime Math organization. We're delighted to have her on the program. You might be asking, what exactly is Bedtime Math? So she wrote a series of books and has an organization that sends out math problems every day. And they're cute little problems. You can do them with your young kids. And the idea is to, have math be something fun, just like a bedtime story. You do your bedtime story, you do a bedtime math. And just to give you a flavor, I thought I'd read a real quick one from my bedtime math story. I'm holding up this book, which this one is Bedtime Math. The Truth Comes Out. This son is called Whoa, and it says, unless you live on a farm, chances are you don't have live horses wandering around your house. So what the heck do people mean when they tell you to hold your horses? Luckily, it doesn't mean you have to grab the reins of a bunch of horses and hang on to stop them from running down the street. It just means, wait a second, or be patient, and comes from the days before cars, when all our wagons were pulled by horses. The question is, if you did have to hold down 6 or 8 horses, would you be strong enough to do it? And then there are 3 levels of problems, so wee ones. Horses each have 4 feet, while people have 2. Who has more? Little kids. If your friend has to hold 6 horses while you're stuck holding 8, how many more do you have? Big kids. If you are calmly riding your bike at 14 miles per hour, but your horse starts pulling you twice as fast as that, how fast are you now going? And the bonus. If at the rodeo there are twice as many people as horses, and there are 24 feet in total, how many horses are there? Right? So these little fun problems that you can figure out with your kids, they have answers printed in there too. So if you're, as the parent, are brain dead at 8 p.m. as you're putting your kid to bed, you don't have to figure out how many feet each horse has and how many feet each person has, and therefore what gets you to 24. But anyway, they're so cute and they're fun to do with the kids. And my family has really enjoyed doing them as a way to just have a little bit more fun with math. So Sarah, after that very long introduction, Sarah's here too. What are your kids doing with math these days?
Well, first of all, I just have to say I'm buying that book now because I think that's super cute. And I was doing that math problem in my head, and I'm going to let the listeners figure out the answer for themselves. But my kids, as you know, or as I've talked about, they are in a Montessori school, which is a little bit different. In South Florida, I know the public schools all use the Common Core math. And so I got a little bit of exposure to that when Annabelle was in elementary school. And the Montessori is a little bit different. I think it's probably a little bit more traditional, although they do some really kind of things I've never seen. They teach addition and kind of number manipulation via this grid system called the stamp game, which is something I had never seen before, but my kids have embraced wholeheartedly. They are really, really big into manipulatives, even for really young kids. So they'll have kids show what it looks like to make 362 of something by having these big blocks that are 100 and you have 3 of those, etc. And my kids, similar to when they were in Common Core, there are some problems that I feel like back when we were doing math, you just had to find the answer. That was all you needed. And now math books are obsessed with oh, no, that's great that you found the answer, but how did you find the answer? And tell me 5 different ways you could find the answer. And my kids hate that. They're like, I just got it okay.
I'm just right.
But I get the rationale because if you don't understand how you did it, when the problem becomes more complex, sometimes you may not be able to instinctively answer it quite as quickly. So I get the rationale for that. But man, that is tough for kids.
Totally. And you guys do some math chat in your own life though, right?
We do. I mean, that comes, and by the way, this topic, I don't know if Laura talked about it in the interview itself, was kind of a reader request because somebody mentioned, we're always talking about literacy and books, which of course is also incredibly valuable. And we love our literacy and book selections and family book clubs and book talk, but we don't have the same attention to math. And I have to say in our household, I think we at least try. We're always when there's an impromptu math problem that just comes up in life, we like to kind of pass it around the kids at different levels, and certainly love to point out whenever there is real life application of math, because kids will kind of fight you and say like, well, why do I need to know this? But Josh is building a hamster cage with Annabelle, and there's so much math, especially because they started with like one size and they had to change the size, and like that's geometry, it is arithmetic, it is measurements, so much math. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I always try to think about that, if I'm just talking with a kid, like, oh, can I throw out like, if we're doing this, I wonder like how many more would be if we did this, or, oh, that's interesting. So if it's 32 and that if it was 3 times that, oh, that's, see what they come up with. And some of them are, pretty quick on the draw with figuring out the math facts, which is interesting. Cause I'm like, well, I guess that is right. I hadn't thought it through. Yeah, no, I love this bedtime math concept. And exactly as you said, we had a listener ask, we're talking about literacy with kids. Do we talk about math and science topics with kids? And we totally think you should. It's just, it's also great to create just a culture in your house of being curious about these topics. And I came across Laura Overdeck many years ago through some other things she had done in the philanthropic world, because she and her husband have been great supporters of various things like gifted education and educational programs for kids, who are trying to learn more math, and supporting teachers and things like that. And bedtime math came out of them actually just doing math with their own kids. And so I've written a couple articles about it because I think it's just such a cool concept. And so I was really thrilled that she was willing to come on the program and talk about it. So without further ado, here is Laura Overdeck, who is the author of all the bedtime math books. We'll hear what she has to say. Well, I'm delighted to welcome Laura Overdeck to the program. Laura, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. I'm Laura Overdeck, and I'm the founder of Bedtime Math.
And you are also a parent as well, that, you're doing bedtime math with kids as well.
I am. I have 3 children, and I consider bedtime math my 4th child, and it just turned 10 years old this year.
Well, that's true. And your children are all older than 10, though, right?
They are.
Yeah. So teenagers there. And you are a mathematician. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you remember of learning about math when you were growing up, your experiences that made you know you were interested in this.
Sure. Well, I really had 2 notable things that I think resulted in me really loving math. One was that I grew up in a house where we did not have flashcards or workbooks, pre-K things at all. My parents just wove math into daily life. My mom's a great cook, so I was baking with teaspoons and tablespoons and fractions really early. My dad does carpentry on the side, so I was using, unsafe power tools at a young age. You got to get the 16th of an inch right. And I think that when the maker movement came about in the early 2010s, that I realized that's what you might have called our house. The second thing is that from 7th grade to 12th grade, I had an excellent math teacher every year. I really lucked out and hit the jackpot. They all not only were very confident in the material, but because they were confident, they were playful with it. And it's just so important to have that kind of experience so that you not only are learning the material, but you don't have math anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you have a culture around it that's healthy.
And I think that's, an issue so many people run up against is, people like, oh, I hate math. I hate, you never hear that with stuff like, you don't hear that as many people say stuff like, I hate reading. I hate words.
No. And I know that you've actually pointed that out in earlier posts that you've written. Yeah, I think that parents are very anxious about math when their kids bring home math homework. And that's a real problem right now, is that there are new methods, and we have a generation of parents who are not solid on it. And then they kind of freak out when they see their kids' homework. And so we then kind of cultivate the same problem again. It becomes bigenerational.
Yeah. Freaking out is never a way to increase somebody's love of something. But why don't you talk a little bit about how bedtime math began? So this is your 4th baby. You're taking care of the 3 other ones. What led to bedtime math?
So it really was the most unpremeditated, kind of out of the garage type thing, except I guess you'd say it was out of the bedroom. But when my husband and I both love math, and when we put our kids to bed, we would give them a bedtime story and then give them a bedtime math problem, because we all know to do the bedtime story and it engenders reading for pleasure. But, what about math for pleasure? Well, if you love math, you do the bedtime math problem. And My firstborn was only 2 when we started this. And, we'd count her stuffed animals, we'd count their noses, then we'd count their ears. That doubled everything. And then as we rolled in more children, a second and a third, we just kept going. And what happened, honestly, was that very competitive parents in my town wanted to know what we were doing with our kids because they were very math fluent. People are like, oh, do you tutor or do you do that thing down the street? And I'm like, no, we just do these math problems at night about whatever we talked about at dinner, pillow forts, flamingos, whatever. And parents said, well, could you share those? And again, this was 2012. So ratcheting back to figure out what was going on then, we were kind of having the Common Core wars. And I think people were just hungry for math to be fun and playful. So I started emailing them out.
And so for those who haven't yet experienced the fun of bedtime math, why don't you talk a little bit about what a bedtime math sort of set looks like? I mean, you've got your books, you've got your app. When you're getting bedtime math, what are you getting?
So whether you're getting an email in your inbox or you can open the app or you can go on our website, you see the same thing, whichever channel you use. And what it is it's a quick opening, like maybe someone set a record riding a unicycle. So there's something funny about that. Then there are 3 questions, wee ones, little kids and big kids. And there are 3 levels basically because I have 3 children and had a question for each kid. So the wee ones is like pre-K. It might be a unicycle's wheel is a circle. Find 4 circles in the room. The little kids will be something with adding, like if you and 3 other people ride unicycles, how many wheels? Or if you throw a bicycle in there, and then the big kids might get into multiplication. And the idea is that the answers are on there and you can click to see them. But the idea is it's not a quiz. It's actually a journey to the right answer. Because when you're a kid at home and you're relaxed and you're talking to a parent or a sibling or whoever you're doing it with, you have all the time in the world. And so you can really just wrangle with it till you get it. And the beauty of this too is that kids can stretch and try a harder one, which they might not want to do in school or have the chance to do. And it just turns math into a journey rather than a judgment.
And many of them are funny too, right? I mean, that's
we try to do that.
Try to do that. I mean, I remember one of the ones we were laughing about is you wrapping toilet paper around something, and of course, their kids love anything involving toilet paper and wrapping. They're not allowed to do
anything that makes a mess.
That really makes a mess. How do you come up with your ideas?
Well, to sum it up, I think textbooks take math and try to make it fun, by sticking a rainbow on there, or a flower, or a leprechaun. What these are is we take things that kids find fun and then find the math in it. So every topic is math. It's kid appealing, and then there's math in it. Kids love to make a mess. They love things that light up. They love vehicles, food, animals. So if you start with, okay, I know kids love porcupines. Like all of a sudden you find you can make a math problem out of that. There's actually a lot to say about porcupines, how many quills they have, how far they shoot off, there's plenty to say. So that's really how kind of observing what kids like and then working off that as a launch pad.
Because there's been thousands of them now.
There have been. I think we've written like 1,300 of them.
1,300. There you go. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick ad break, and then we will be back with Laura Overdeck talking about bedtime math. All right, so I am back talking with Laura Overdeck, who's the founder of the Bedtime Math organization. So let's go back to this topic of the anxiety many parents feel about math and kids and how it just seems a little bit more, we're less fluent in it than we are in the idea of reading stories to our kids and all that. And in fact, the reason, obviously you're doing great things, we wanted to have you on for that, but one of the reasons we're having you on is we got a question from a listener. She said, okay, you guys have had literacy experts on talking about the importance of reading with your kids and how to read with your kids for X, Y, and Z. Why haven't you had anyone on talking about math? I'm like, well, that's a good question, but it isn't as obvious, is it, for many people?
It's true. I think there's several things at work here. One is that reading is a little more forgiving than math, right? Math has a right answer or some right answers generally. And so you are right or wrong when you're doing a math problem. And if you're not facing success right away and you don't have the proper support, it becomes anxiety producing. With reading, you can read a book and write an essay on it or get quizzed on it. And if you got the general idea, you can kind of skate by. It's not so binary of like right or wrong. And secondly, I think reading, you're kind of doing it on the fly all the time. I would argue that you're doing math also, but I think the reading is a little more obvious. You get out of bed right away, you look at your phone, go outside, look at a street sign, you're always reading. And so in a way, it feels like a more casual part of life. In fact, with the pandemic hitting, kids did not slide in reading as much as they did in math, partly because they just have it in their environment. Without trying, a parent can have some reading. Obviously, better to have books in the house, but even without that, you're confronted by words all the time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So there's been more of a slide than in math that
yes,
people are
math
seeing.
slid more during the pandemic because the reading kept going. And also then because you just have this kind of cyclical generational thing going where a parent is more confident and playful with reading. And so then they're more likely to do it. When a pandemic hits, I saw that this was true even among professionals, that when schools were offering summer school, a lot of them are doing just literacy and not math, because I think it was easier to talk the teachers into coming and doing literacy because teachers are math anxious as well sometimes.
So what do we do about that? I mean, honestly, what do we do? I mean, yeah, it's widespread math anxiety and it doesn't bode well.
Well, the good news is first of all, if you get down to the neuroscience, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but the brain is plastic and you learn every day, you learn all the time. So I truly believe that all these adults out there who are nervous about math, we can all do elementary math. We all graduated from elementary school. We can do this. I have hope because I know that fans write to Bedtime Math and say, I'm working on counting and adding with my kid. And for the first time, I'm enjoying math. And that's the thing, is if you start from the beginning with your kid, you fill in your own gaps. By the time they hit third and fourth grade, like you're on a roll with them. So if we could get parents to do that, I really believe we would have success because it is doable. The other piece of this is that there are different methods for teaching things today. So parents, if their kids have a question about the homework, they start arguing about like, what's the right way to do this? We hear this all the time. Parents are like, I tried to help. And my kid is like, no, you're doing it wrong. The problem is that the dance steps have changed, but the math is the same. And what parents need is almost like a little translator to say, okay, this crazy lattice multiplication is just multiplying like you did, or this bar model is just like the rows of apples you saw on your worksheet. It's the same stuff. So what we're doing at Bedtime Math right now is a whole campaign, Be Part of the Equation. And it's to energize parents around getting involved in their kids' math learning and the gaps that have to be closed. And part of it is we're going to build a whole parent corner to offer support on this stuff.
Yeah, as you figure out the new ways of doing math. If parents are looking for ways to kind of make their house more math fluent, right? Like a lot of us, you're like, okay, we need books on our walls if we want to, our kids to be good readers.
Right.
What can we do to create households that are math positive?
I think it's just a matter of when questions come up, quantifying them. You could be talking about something that's funny that went on in town, and you could be like, what, how many people do you think were there at the park when that happened? Or you could be looking out the window. How many cars do you think drive by our street every day? Or it's just weaving it in. And certainly there's anything that's hands-on immediately involves math because items have mass, they have a weight, they have a size, they have a speed if you're throwing them, and just observing the world that way, it starts to happen very naturally. In fact, there was a big gold standard study about the Bedtime Math app that found that when parents do this with their kids end up like 3 months ahead in math skills in just 1 year. What was interesting is that it didn't matter whether the families did it 7 days a week or just 2 days a week. They had almost the same gains just doing it 2 or 3 times a week. And the researchers' hypothesis is that it's because it changed the conversation in the house, whether they were doing it twice or 5 times a week. The family started to just notice. It just awakened the numbers around people.
Yeah, that all of a sudden there were math conversations that were happening in the household.
Right.
Yeah, no, I know we've been trying to do things like, driving along the highway, like, oh, wow, we're going 20 miles per hour. It's so slow here. I wonder how long it's going to take us to go the, 15 miles we have to go now.
Exactly. And, I think food is just such a great entree, no pun intended, to getting math into the day, because I know that I'm not the world's greatest chef, but I do love to cook. And when the kids were little, sometimes I would just cut their meal into triangles instead of squares. Like, we're always cutting squares. Why? Triangles are cool. They look cool. Sometimes I'd stack things or put, toothpicks and make pyramids of anything are amazing, because the pyramid numbers, like 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2 plus 3, just lining things up that way and saying to kids, can any number work? Doing that when you take your chocolate chips or your Cheerios, once you get on a roll, you find you don't have to think very hard about it. It just happens. And it's so healthy for kids to just see the world through a new lens like that.
Yes. Next thing you do, you're doing the Fibonacci sequence with your Cheerios. You could totally do that. Yeah, exactly. And, toys and everything else. I mean, is there anything like, if we want to have certain toys around the house that are maybe more encouraging of math?
Definitely. So board games are great. And you can take a board game that doesn't look mathy, like Candyland. That pattern of blue, yellow, green, whatever it is, repeats every 6, it's mods, the way a clock has mods. So you could pull a card and be like, without counting, how many spaces are you going to jump if you pick the double blue? Like, you can actually work math into it. I also think anything with dice, Parcheesi is great. Monopoly is great, of course. And I would say not on the iPad, play it on the board, because then you got to make your own change, work with the bank. It's all really good. I will also admit that when we used to sit and wait for the bus, I would play poker with my kids, like Texas Hold'em. They were in 5th grade, 3rd grade, and we would just play poker, and get used to the probabilities and how many cards are in the deck. And, it's cards, dice, and board games are all great.
Great ways to encourage kids to be doing more math. Yeah. Well, it sounds good. But the thing, probably we don't want to do the flashcards. You mentioned you were a household with no flashcards, right?
Well, it's funny, because when I then encountered flashcards in school, I liked them. I liked the
it's just a game.
If you're competitive, you like it, right? But I think flashcards are fine for kids who already like math and are feeling really confident. I don't think flashcards win anyone over. And there are just so many other ways. So as an example, Bedtime Math, we've actually made a beach ball with numbers all over it. You can actually get it on our website. And you throw it back and forth. And when you catch it, whatever 2 numbers your thumbs are next to, you can make any game. Like, you catch it and you have to add them, and then you throw it to the next person, or maybe you multiply. You can practice, and maybe you make a 2-digit number, 23. You can practice.
Dividing might be harder. I was just pondering.
Right. Oh, you can do all kinds of things. And really, anybody who has a beach ball at home, if you just take a Sharpie and write the 9 digits all over it and throw it back and forth. Kids love chucking things. They just love throwing things. And we call it's volleyball math, essentially.
Sounds fun. And does this work if kids are feeling behind in math? I know a lot of people, you mentioned that there were these gaps that are needing to be caught up. And if you're, dealing with a kid who's feeling anxious about math because of that, they know they're behind or anything. I mean, can this all help with that as well?
Well, when kids are behind, there are 2 things going on. One is they might not understand the concept they're working on. Especially once you get up into fractions, like adding fractions and why the denominators have to be the same. The problem is a lot of times we mechanize and we say, when you add, they have to be the same. When you multiply, they don't. And kids don't know why that is. So there's that problem. And then on top of it, if you're not fast with your math facts, all the work takes longer. I like to say it's like flying down a highway. If you're doing a big math problem, like a long division problem, you don't want to have to keep pulling off the highway on every exit ramp to stop and think about, well, what is 5 times 4? Or what is 8 minus 2? And then get on the highway again, and then you get off. You want to just fly down the highway and be sinking your teeth into the cool math problem, not kind of the drudgery of the little math facts worked in. So I would say that getting kids fluent in their math facts is something that anybody can do. And it takes away that layer of stress right off the bat. And then you can kind of dig into what is actually going on.
That's why we're throwing the volleyball back and forth, right? Exactly. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about I mean, just switching to a like sort of career focused thing here. You're running the Bedtime Math organization. How do you guys decide what to do next? Like, as you're, like what
we're
sets the
big
direction?
believers in trying to see what is needed. Often it is reactive. People come to us and say, we need X or Y. I'm a big fan of the book Zag. It's a short, quick marketing book that I think is fantastic. And it talks about how much as a painting has like the white space in the painting, you want to do that as an organization. And you want to ride a wave. No matter how hard you work, your idea cannot propel out there beyond you unless other people take it and run with it. So it is very hard with math because it's not a popular subject and there is so much math anxiety. But we feel that we've, for instance, hit a nerve with this idea that parents are not comfortable with their kids' math homework and it causes a lot of tears. And we've realized that when we talk about this with parents, they just ignite. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so true. So with this campaign, there are so many ways this campaign could go, but that's one of the directions simply because we're reading other people in a sense.
Yeah, so people send you ideas and you're like, what of all this makes sense? What needs could we fill then?
Right.
Excellent. Well, Laura, this is fascinating. And I encourage everyone to, sign up for Bedtime Math, start getting these problems you can do with your young kids. And then maybe they'll keep talking to you about calculus as they get older.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because we've always had a pretty steady audience of new people coming to Bedtime Math. Like the original users have aged out and new users have come in and it's so great. But I will tell you, when the pandemic hit, you could tell that was a moment where all of a sudden everyone felt more urgency because we were just swamped. Our website traffic went up by a factor of 12 because like every parent in America was looking for a way to keep their kid going those first few weeks before we knew, how long we were going to be in this mess. And the point is, it's quick and easy to work that into your day every day, especially if you hook it to a routine. So you remember to do it.
So just when you read your bedtime story, you do your bedtime math. And
that's right.
You're saying both are equally wonderful to snuggle up and do together. So Laura, we always end with a love of the week. This can be anything that is exciting for you at the moment. I'm going to have to put mine out as the Philadelphia sports teams at the moment. I know you're in New Jersey, but
I know it's okay.
It's okay. But our Eagles and our Phillies, both doing pretty well these days. So I haven't really gone to many live sports of late, but hopefully I'll get back into some. I guess the Phillies almost over, but the Eagles maybe I'll go see. So cheers to them. How about you? What is exciting for you this week?
Well, I will tell you. I mean, and this is just such a mathy thing, but I love Google alerts because when you set a Google alert for a word, things just pop up that you would never know are out there on this enormous web that's out there. I finally set an alert for the word math. I had never done it because I was afraid I'd just get deluged, but it's all very controlled. But I have renewed hope in this country because some of the things that come up are just people, like a teacher doing math lessons with In-N-Out burgers, a farmer having a pre-K math program where kids come and like count the sheep and the chickens. I mean, it's just the funniest things come up. And it just, in a world that's been pretty dark lately, it actually has been a blast to just see people with such initiative and creativity out there, making it better.
Awesome.
Forging ahead.
Well, let's hope that people listening to this are going to start doing more awesome things with math as well.
That's right.
All right, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So that was great hearing from Laura Overdeck about bedtime math and how we can be doing math problems along with bedtime stories to help make our kids more comfortable with math and not have some of that math anxiety that unfortunately I know a lot of people struggle with these days. So Sarah, we have a different question. This is not math related, but we will throw that in. Can you read it for us?
Yeah, so this came in hot off the press because I have been taking the kids out to dinner recently. I think it started when, Genevieve is in ballet and it's not her favorite thing, but I actually think she's going to really grow to enjoy it because it's like she doesn't want to go, but then when she goes, she like skips out of there and is so happy. So I'm trying to just like encourage it. So I said to her, okay, one of these days when you go to ballet, I'll take you out to dinner afterwards. And she got super excited about that idea because it ends right around 5 o'clock. So couple weeks ago, she just called me out on it impromptu. Hey, mom, like, when is our dinner? Can we go tonight? And I was like, okay. So I texted our nanny. I took her to dinner. And then, of course, the other two kids, you can't have a special thing with one kid without making it even, at least not in our household. So that begun a series of dinners. So I took both the little kids actually chose the same sushi place. And then Annabelle chose a ramen place that had boba tea. So apparently my kids are only into Asian cuisine, and that's fine with me. But the question then came through my blog when I talked about these dinners. And Emily writes, I love that you're taking some evenings to have dinners alone with each kid. The coolest idea. I'm curious how you arrange childcare for those evenings. Do you always have your nanny there for the evening or dinner time swirl, or do you have the nanny there as if it were you and your husband going on date night? And she writes that she struggles with extra childcare when it's not essential, like when she's not working. So she wanted to hear how other people use childcare to inspire her to get more creative and probably to give her permission to lean into it more so she can invest in relationships with loved ones, friends, or just myself. It's a great question.
Yeah. So what do you do? Yeah.
So I feel like this has changed. And the main thing that has changed is that most days our nanny does not start her day until noon or even like 2:30, 3 o'clock, because especially now that I no longer have my GME responsibilities, Josh and I can take the kids to school very easily every day because, as I've mentioned, like this was by design in part, but the school is on the way to my workplace. It starts at a time that works. I can drop them off at 8 and make it in time for my clinic at 8:30. It fits very well. So there's no reason I don't need our nanny to come in the morning. I do run in the morning, but I usually aim to get back by 6:30, 6:45 so that, I just don't need the extra help. And so with that, it means that I have continued to want to employ our nanny full time, in part because she only wants a full-time job and I want to keep her working for us. So it works for us to not necessarily use full-time hours, but to embrace the flexibility that means some nights she might stay later or she might cover a weekend or, do other things, because that's kind of what our family needs. And I think she things have evolved and she is understanding of that because, many days she gets to work for just a few hours and she gets paid. We do a full-time pay no matter how many actual hours that she works in the week. Anyway, I feel good about that. And it means that I have permission that, it's certainly not every night. Many nights I don't need her after 6 o'clock either. So she goes home. But then on some nights, if I have a kid that has a late pickup that I don't want to drag the other kids to, or if I want to take the kids on a one-on-one outing, that means she can stay later. The funny thing is you'd think I would use this for date nights with Josh, but weeknight date nights for us are not typically a thing because his work schedule is so unpredictable that I think if I was like, oh, you're going to meet me at 7, like that could lead to so much disappointment if he couldn't make it, that we typically do our date nights on weekends. And that's with a different babysitter. So it's not that we don't do date nights. We're just like not going to do them on a Thursday night. But for book club or taking the kids out or whatever, it works really, really well. I get the guilt. Like I didn't feel like I had the ability to do this as much when she was working truly full-time hours, but this is just kind of how it's evolved. And I would say if you can swing it or the hours are reasonable, then this is like it should be like the least guilt-inducing reason of all to use extra childcare. You're spending time with a child, right? And if you have a partner that doesn't work until 7, 8 o'clock at night, this could be on a rotational basis with your partner where, you take one kid out and then they take one kid out, or you figure out some kind of fun rotation there. So I highly encourage and give you permission to try some different arrangements from what you have been doing. I find it really rewarding to go out with my kids one-on-one.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that other than I totally think that using childcare to have some pleasant one-on-one time with kids when you do have a brood of them is one of the best uses of it. What makes, time with kids so much more pleasant when you're not refereeing fights over this, restaurant dinner table if you just have one and you can focus on them completely. I haven't done so much of this because, many of the kids are less into cuisines that I might also wish to eat. But I mean, I've taken a lot of kids to Italian restaurants. I've taken my, Sam, my 13-year-old, to Japanese restaurants. And I want to take Jasper out to a Brazilian steakhouse, but I think the others might want to go to that too. So we'll see. This is something I should probably start doing more of. I just need to, get organized and make it happen. In our case, it could either be that, Michael was covering, because as he's been doing a lot more working from home, that's more of a feasible option. Our nanny also works until 7, a couple nights a week. So because we do have younger kids, getting us through the dinner thing is often really helpful, not to have to drag him around to activities as well. And so, an early dinner would work on a night where I wasn't driving, for instance. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. And yes, you have our full permission to use childcare for not working time. I mean, I just going to throw out here that there are people who are not employed who use childcare for various things. Especially, I know a lot of, families who have multiple kids and, maybe mom isn't currently employed, but they still have at least part-time childcare precisely because of all the driving and such. So throw that out there. You are welcome to use it for things that are not your exact, 20 minutes outside your work hours and no more. It's all good. All right, this has been Best of Both Worlds. We've been talking with Laura Overdeck about bedtime math and making math more fun in our households. We will be back next week with more on making work and life fit together.
Thanks for listening. You can find me, Sarah, at theshoebox.com or at @the_shoebox on Instagram.
And you can find me, Laura, at lauravanderkam.com. This has been the Best of Both Worlds podcast. Please join us next time for more on making work and life work together.